Good evening, everyone. We are back again for a great show tonight. We were here with you last week, and those who were here last week saw that we had a good show last week. We tend to have another one again tonight. This topic, though, is going to be a little different. We gave a tribute to King last week, which is definitely something we do every year, but we've never done this particular topic before as we try to bring you new and innovative things every week when we're on. As you know, we took a little bit of hiatus. I know those who were on last week. I talked about us kind of making a comeback last week. This will be our second show in a row that we've done in quite a while. But this particular topic, like I said, we've never covered. It is something that I think we're going to need to get into, and it's something that we haven't addressed and we need to address, especially where we have been seeing recent news of yet again other police killings that has happened recently and continue to happen on a monthly basis in this country. But we're going to get really deep into it. But before we do, I want to welcome all the guests, those who are tuning in from wherever you are in the country. Drop in the chat. Let us know where you're checking in from. We would love to hear from you. And as always, we want you to be a part of the discussion. So we are going to be reading comments. We're going to be reacting to those comments. We're going to be asking questions to probe discussion from you all, and as well as you hear from us as well. So that's kind of the lay of the land. That's kind of what we usually do. So let me first introduce, though, who are going to. No, there's no stranger. You know, Tim has been with us. He's one of our newer members. We bring on folks. The Panthers and things like that we've had on quite a bit. You've seen a couple of shows with them that we consider them to be somewhat of our members. But as our core member, Tim has joined us, I believe, sometime last year, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe the year before. The years are running together. But he's been with us quite a while, but this is going to be his show in the sense of he's going to be taking you through all the questions. He's going to be leading you through all this. We're glad to have him. We're excited about tonight. I know he's excited as well. So without further ado, Tim, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks, G, Isaac, Dukes. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm thankful that you guys gave me this opportunity to come on and present this information. I'm really proud to be here, because we all have similar mindsets, similar missions, similar goals, and I'm happy to be able to illustrate this perspective and these positions in conjunction with you guys. My name is Timothy Hampton. Again, I'll be doing a little moderation tonight, so stick with me. I promise to make it as interesting and as exciting as possible. But I'd like to just start off by referencing again the title of tonight's discussion, which is Killing at Will. Kill at Will, America's violent obsession with white supremacy. Kill at will, America's violent obsession with white supremacy. And this is true. America does have a violent obsession with white supremacy, past and present, because in America, it's okay for white supremacists to kill black and brown people. It's okay, especially if it's done in a manner to maintain white supremacy or white supremacist ideology, and there can be no penalty whatsoever. I wanted to discuss this in conjunction with qualified immunity and some other things that happened in colonial legislation, but we're going to break the discussion down into three parts. Part one will just be a brief discussion of the history of killing at will in the United States and how white supremacists have mounted ongoing campaign of racialized violence against black and brown people in what would become the Americas, and how it's pretty effectively been ignored, hidden, or banned, as is the case in Florida. Part two will be a brief discussion of the modern context and modern implications of this kind of thinking, being able to kill people at will without repercussion, without any kind of consequences, and how that may not be a good fit for the modern era. And last, we're going to talk about some solutions, what we can do to end the 400-year attack on Black and brown people in the Americas. So kill it will, America's violent obsession with white supremacy. So what better way is there to demonstrate one's superiority over another individual besides killing them, without consequence? Now, I don't want you to answer that because no matter what the answer is, you die. Okay, bro, you disagree? I'm just gonna kill you and walk away scot-free. And that, for me, has always been quite the paradox, right? White supremacists sought to prove, or seek to prove, social, moral, intellectual, spiritual superiority by killing people. Just kill them. No repercussions, no punishment, nothing. This has been a strategy for centuries in this part of the world. Just kill people, extreme violence, murder, and it's literally written in our history. And that's where our discussion begins. In colonial Virginia, established in 1607, first 20, 30 Africans arrived by 1619. And in 1669, that number was in the thousands, okay? So in response to the growing number of enslaved people in colonial Virginia, they passed this Casual Killing Act, which permitted any slave owner or white person to legally kill an enslaved person without consequence when the death occurred, as in the execution of punishment or correction, okay? So what was happening was overseers liberally applied violent punishment to slaves because they couldn't be fined, they couldn't be imprisoned, so they got beaten for whatever infractions there were. And if their death occurred as a result of being beaten for an infraction or part of corrective action, then the master or whoever did that under the master's order could not be punished. There's also some research to indicate that this law was used to protect white women who were beating the children under their charge to death. So imagine that. Killing as casual and inconsequential as jeans on Friday, or, as relaxed and unconcerned as chatting with a coworker, okay? And I guess this leads me to our first guiding question. What would someone have to do to you or a loved one for you to want to beat them to death? Okay, because in colonial Virginia, these weren't shootings. This was 1669. These people were being beaten to death. So what would someone have to do to you or a loved one to make you want to beat them to death with an instrument of your hand? You know how hard it is to beat somebody to death? But that's what they did. It was killing made lawful. And they took that sentiment and they marched it forward through history. 1672. I think we have a slide. 1672, colonial Virginians passed an act for the apprehension and suppression of runaways and Negro slaves in 1672. Where my slide at? Where my slide at? Yeah, there it is. It shall and may be lawful upon resistance of such Negro, mulatto, Indian, servant, or slave to kill or wound him in so resisting. Okay, so what do they always yell when they grab you by the hand on TV, the police? Stop resisting. Resistance is simply a death penalty offense in the United States by summary execution by pretty much anyone who has been authorized to put their hand on you since 1672. 1680, the next slide, the General Assembly of Virginia passes an act for preventing Negro insurrections, okay? 1680. Now, we are truncating these, but the Act for Preventing Negro Insurrections proclaims that it shall be lawful to kill the said Negro or slave. This is 1680 when they're trying to prevent people from running away. This act has a lot more than this. It's very truncated, but 1680, from 1669 to 1680, they have 3 laws making it okay to kill people. 1682, an act for this is the Casual Killing Act amended, and if any slave resist his master by his or her order correcting such a slave, and shall happen to be killed in such correction, it shall not be accounted felony. The master shall be free and acquitted of all punishment and accusation as if such incident never happened. There's that word resist again, and there's that word shall be lawful, or it shall, I mean, come on. This is written into our history. So we were going to talk about qualified immunity becoming a thing in 1967, but it was there for 300 years before that. So again, what would someone have to do to you or a loved one to make you want to beat them to death? How is that a thing, right? You get so angry that a slave broke a piece of equipment, or maybe a minor infraction, maybe a major infraction. You beat them to death, and then that's just okay. Okay, so after 1682, the slave patrols were established as a means of policing. I mean, the modern day police force could be traced back to the slave patrols of the 1700s, and these were created in the Carolinas with one mission, which was to establish a system of terror and squash slave uprisings with the capacity to pursue, apprehend, and return runaway slaves to their owners. Okay, excessive force, all these things were tactics that they used to produce the desired effect. After the slave patrols were the organized militias of the 1800s. Slave patrols persisted until the end of the Civil War with the passage of the 13th Amendment. And then they went to these organized militias, which really had the same purpose, which really had the same power. And they were used to enforce the black codes and strict local and state laws that regulated and restricted the rights of the freed African Americans. And then after the 1800s, the police departments were established. Again, same people, same mission, same process in the 1800s. They were used to enforce the Jim Crow laws. Okay, so when we talk about the willful killing of Black and brown people in the United States, we can see that it's been marched right down through history, through Virginia, which was our first successful colony. Everything that is the United States passed through Virginia because Virginia was the first colony. So we know that this is American history. This is just the way it is. And you had that slide up. How is this okay? Still okay after 400 years of human evolution. And I want to open that up to you guys now, because that is my presentation as far as the history of it is concerned. But what do you guys think? What comes to mind when I ask you, how is this still okay? How is this still something that can just be done? And there's nothing that can be said other than that's not right, or we should have a protest.
I think in the beginning, these things are easy to do if you don't view your subject as human. So once you dehumanize a situation or a human being, it's easier um, to take advantage of that person. So the first thing was, keep in mind, at that
Yeah.
time they didn't consider them to be human anyway, or they didn't consider us to be human anyway. So anything could be done because we were equated as chattel. You know what I'm saying? So same way you would same way you would whoop a horse, same way you whoop a cow. the equivalent was same thing for slaves at the time.
And I'm glad you said that because, this is true. We were not considered human beings. It was colonial era thinking, right? Thinking from the colonial era. And it was irrational, it was illogical, it was reprehensible then, and it hasn't changed. White supremacy, violent white supremacy has still been a mainstay in American culture, but we've let so many other things from the colonial era go. Like, if we were going to go back to colonial era thinking, we would have to stop bathing regularly. Maybe a few times a year you bathe in a bathtub, and when you do, you use the same bath water as the person before you. Okay, that's colonial era thinking, colonial era culture and values. Brush your teeth with borax or gunpowder. Colonial era values. Go to the barber and the blacksmith to get your teeth pulled. You know what I mean? Colonial era thinking and colonial era values. But 400 years later, we're still thinking this violent white supremacy is okay. And we haven't evolved from that. We haven't moved on from that.
But some of it also is embedded within the Constitution also. So you look at the Second Amendment. There has been a lot of discussion on why the foundation of the Second Amendment was there. You hear the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, and why was that needed? And so one point of view is that we had the North and the South, and during that time, you were just talking about this, slave revolts and uprisings. The South wanted to have armed militias, but keep in mind the North at the same time they wanted the federal government to be control of these militias, and so the South fear was if the federal government was in charge of these of the militia, then if there was a slave revolt, they were thinking big. If there was a slave revolt, why would the North come and help?
Mm-hmm.
So in a compromise. It was having states control the militias and controls guns. But keep in mind, the South wanted one of the guns to protect in case of a revolt, to control Africans, to control slaves in case something like that happened. So now this is really the foundation of the Second Amendment for another way, or like same thing with the policing, whatever, is a way of controlling slaves. And i.e., the Second Amendment is there. It has transcended from 1776 on to now.
Yeah. We have. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say there are a couple comments that we could respond to, and one of them made me think about how the concept of correction is something that is promoted in the statutes that you presented to us, Tim, and as we've discussed already, the concept of correction authorizes police to kill, maim, murder, beat, or bludgeon even today. And I think it's interesting to see how far back in our history that concept goes, and how that concept, although today not written into law in any racialized way, comes from a racialized place in our history. And of course, today is still applied in a very racialized way. But today it's interesting to read the laws and see how they have been sanitized, so to speak, deracialized, so to speak, put into more so-called objective language to sort of mask where in fact the law does come from. But so when someone says today, like, if you resist, like, you shouldn't have resisted, right? That statement comes from these laws 400 years ago. So it's interesting to see the connection between then and now, in the way the laws are written and the way people talk today. So that's one of my reflections.
I think if it's woven into the fabric of American culture, like Dukes just talked about, and like you just talked about, centuries of killing at will without any consequences is a pretty hard habit to break, especially when it's not seen as inappropriate or unlawful or unjust. In response to that, 88% of police departments don't even report hate crimes. 88%. Only 12% of police departments even report hate crimes because they don't see what happens to Black and brown people at the hands of white supremacists as hate. Because I think, police are some of the most prolific perpetrators of hate crimes. So they would really have to be reporting on themselves the vast majority of the time. And that statistic is not a difficult one to find. I think we can throw it in the comments. It's difficult to understand, but the second point I'd like to make to this is why this is still okay after 400 years of evolution, is that you still cannot violate the rights of a person who has none. You can't. The precedence was set in colonial times, and it applies in modern times. We have no rights that white supremacists are bound to respect, and that is based in large part on the Dred Scott decision of 1857. We have no rights in this country that white supremacists are bound to respect, and that's a paraphrase of what the Dred Scott decision reads. It's a paraphrase and a loose one at that, but the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, these things are only sparsely applied to us because I think it's been said already tonight, we weren't considered men, still not considered men in this country. And Imari brought this up first, the humanity question. Humanity of Black and brown people in the Americas has not yet been established or recognized. It just hasn't. It just hasn't. I think the white supremacists in this country and in this part of the world have spent centuries denying the humanity of the people they subjugated and slaughtered so that they could subjugate and slaughter them. So that's, a large part of the situation. And the humanity question is a big one. And I think, you mentioned that one first.
Free sense humor.
So I thought, a discussion of qualified immunity, I wanted to talk about it. Like I said earlier, I wanted to talk about this phenomenon of representatives of your state and local and federal government being able to point a weapon and pull a trigger without any provocation or justification and not see any kind of reconciliation, redress, justice, anything, nothing. But it's been written into our history since 1669. It's okay. You can just do this in this country. And I think a large part of why they can do that, I mean, we've already discussed it, but yeah, we're not considered human. We're not considered human. And I think that could bring us to our next question. How do we put an end? How do we put an end to the wanton racial violence against Black and brown people? How do we put an end to the 400-year attack? Both violence, intellectual violence, economic violence. How do we put an end to this? G, I think you had some ideas on this in the planning session.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at how we put it into most things, when it comes to issues in this country, we do it with lawmakers. Now we know the law has not been on our side. We know the justice system is not built to work for Black and brown people. But the fact that there has been some movement, and I think I did bring this up before we were talking offline, about how it only took a year for legislation to come down with the Asian hate. That whole situation where there was a rash of, due to COVID, there was a rash of attacks on Asian Americans because people were thinking that all Asians somehow had something to do with COVID. Okay, so there were some beatings. There was a couple, surprise attacks on elderly people. I'm not saying that was okay. I'm not condoning any of that. What I'm saying is the fact that you're talking a year. You're talking about 450 years of slavery and 150 years of terrorized and brutal living situations and being terrorized in this country. And we're talking 1 year and nothing's moved. So there definitely need to be something on the books. Unfortunately, we thought there was going to be some movement after the George Floyd killing in 2020, but there was nothing that came out of that other than this one bill that was proposed, HR 7120. You can look it up by 116th Congress, where they proposed a George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. So there's which basically doesn't say anything. It means training. It means you go into a couple weeks of training, implicit bias training, DEI training. That was a big phrase of DEI and equity came out of the George Floyd murder. But that's not enough. That has not been enough, obviously, because that's after that happened, we go into I believe last year was a record. Police killing was last year. So if that actually did anything, that particular bill did something, which it didn't do anything, then we wouldn't have saw the rise of police killings 2 years later. So it's an idea. It's a wish. It's on a wish list. It's a bucket list that there actually will be a law, something to protect the lives of Black and brown people in this country. But with the current administration, with the current politicians that we had in office, we haven't seen anyone that has been bold enough to even introduce a bill of such that would actually protect us from the hands of the murderers who happen to be more so white people. Because when you look at the mass shootings in this country, if you look at the mass shootings, if you do the research between 1982 and 2003, in terms of mass shooters by ethnicity, 73 situations have been by white, 24 by Black, 11 Latino, 10 Asian. So we're not the ones who are going in killing. And by the way, most of these mass shooters walk out alive. They don't need to have any laws to protect them because they're already protected. We're the ones that are open season just for the simple fact of the color of our skin. Black men, Black women, we're the most unprotected people on the face of this planet. And we definitely need to have something in place. And like I say, yeah, there could be some laws, but the reality of it is that we're going to have to protect ourselves like we've been doing. There's a whole reason for the Panthers to, we have to protect ourselves. But I think that if so happens, there's a bold lawmaker that will introduce a bill for the protection of Black and brown people in this country to not be killed just by, or if there's if we want to call it if there is a killing, unjustified killing, like we've seen by the police, like we've seen by these mass shooters, then we make sure they don't see the light of day. We don't want a trial and then they be acquitted or we're given like a 10-year sentence. We're talking about mandatory life sentence. We need something to that effect because too many of us have been slaughtered. Too many of us have been terrorized in this country, and we're just totally left wide open. I feel absolutely no protection here in this country at all. I feel like any given moment, any given day, I could be the next hashtag. And then why should I feel that way? Like you said, all these years later, we're still in the same boat. We're still in the same situation. No, we're not in the field. We're in a different type of plantation, but we're not necessarily in the same predicament as being slaves. But we're still terrorized on a daily basis. So that's
And,
my thought.
I think you have a good point. I think you made several good points. I think you were right about going to a group that is as old as the country itself, the legislature, dominated by white supremacists, and ask them to willfully and knowingly compromise or weaken the legacy of white supremacy. I have an uncle who used to say, "You cannot go to the thief who robbed you to get your money back." They robbed us of our humanity in order to build the illusion of white supremacy. So they can't give us that back, at least not through their legislative system, not with the current politicians that we have, just to jump on your coattails. And then that's one thing. And then, the other thing is they become straight sinners if they recognize our humanity. They give us our humanity. They allow us to be human beings in this country. They become straight sinners because, Mari, you said it. Black and brown people are counted amongst the beasts of the earth. We are not considered human beings in this country. So, and like I said, they spent centuries just denying our humanity at every turn so that they could do this. And if they allow us our humanity back, then how can they explain their actions? It's like our man Ron DeSantis in Florida banning African American studies classes. Like, you're not going to learn about that. You're not going to learn what happened to your ancestors. You're not going to learn what my ancestors did to yours or what your ancestors did to mine in this country or in this state. You're not going to learn about that. We're going to keep you deaf, dumb, and blind, treat you like mushrooms, keep you in the dark, feed you a lot of shit, And I think that's one of the reasons that this is still okay.
Hey, so
go ahead.
So, hey, Grant, it sounded
Yeah.
before like you said something about protection. Are you suggesting some kind of violent response to the violence of law enforcement and white rage more broadly? Picture of Dr. King posted as we discuss.
Right.
That's funny.
I mean, you're saying as a response to us, some type of demonstration. I mean, we've done that though, right? But not to the point of where it has really effectively. I mean, we just saw the brother of the black. What was it? The Black Lives Matter. Didn't her brother just get killed by a police officer? So, and all they did was march. All they did was protest. All they did was, some type of demonstration to go against the grain and to make some type of statement against police brutality. I think that's, I mean, King is a great person to look at, as to say, I want to act out non-violently. Now, we know that there was just an incident a couple of days ago, a week ago in Atlanta, where they're now saying Antifa. That's now that's who's behind all this stuff, right? So, I had a situation where a car blew up, there was a bomb or something like that. And actually, those who were arrested were all folks that weren't from the city, as always. And these people are provocateurs, are being bussed in. They are being paid to do these type of things. But what I think that when it comes to demonstrations, there has to be, and I think someone put this in the chat, not necessarily from the chat from you all, but our own discussion about economics. I think I've said this before on the show, is that we have to start thinking of economic disobedience, where we're now starting to boycott. And they've done this, of course, and with the Montgomery bus boycott, which was an economic boycott. That hurt the pockets of the bus system to where they had to adhere to their demands because they were going to go broke. Now, for some reason, we haven't took up those type of strategies from the civil rights movement, but we've taken on other demonstrations and things of the nature of that particular time, but we haven't economically put a hurting on the system, if you will. So I don't know, Isaac. I mean, I may not be answering your question correctly, but I think we do need to change our approach when it comes to responding to our rage should be redirected in different ways than we've done in the past.
I think there's a disconnect. I think there is a serious, glaring disconnect between what's happening to us as people in this country, citizens of this country being murdered by representatives of the country, and just straight white supremacists in general, like a George Zimmerman or these guys in Georgia who killed this guy who was jogging. I think there's a disconnect between all this violence and all this nonviolence. I'm not saying that anybody should get together en masse and start a violent campaign against representatives of our country or representatives of our government. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I think individuals should handle these things individually, perhaps. I don't think you need 5,000 people on the steps of the Capitol building to handle what one individual can do.
On my end, so all these things are agreeing with the status quo of how the system is. And so what happens is it sounds as if, and I think maybe this has been the problem. We've been trying to be a part of the system that has been racist at its core. As we spoken earlier, the Second Amendment, the start of the state, as the start of the nation, the Second Amendment talks about the patrolling of Africans and African slaves and rebelling against them. The writing of the Constitution was written by white males. Our current country doesn't look that way, so it can't really govern. You can't use the Constitution because it doesn't have everybody involved. The 3/5 clause is still in it, and we're still using that. Matter of fact, what we're talking about right now, the House of Representatives, that's because of the 3/5 clause, and so how that was made up. So we're trying to be a part of a system that's racist at its core, and so it's illogical. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're begging to be part of a burning house, and so at some point, it's like, when do we say, you know what? Everything needs to be changed because everybody is not included in the foundation of the writing. And what we believe in, we look at how it was written, but it was written by white men who didn't look at us, black women as equals at that time. So why are we using this as the crust of the foundation of what what we should be like, what the nation should be? It's time to change it all.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think something that was written so long ago with such good intentions and with great language and great potential, I think needs to be revised, needs to be reinvestigated. I think maybe dissected, dismantled, and rebuilt because it's not working for everybody. It's only working for a specific group of people. But that's the way they like it. That's the way they want it. That's the way it's supposed to be as far as they're concerned. And that's what you're up against.
And when you say that the way that they like it, so when we talk about the killing of when we talk about the killing of black people by police officers, when someone calls the cops on a black person, this is what they expect. So you can keep in mind right now, if the cops came around and just gave out tickets when stuff happened, people would be complaining on why didn't you do more, right? I mean, if you look at anything happen, people justify their behavior or step in the line. It's justified. So when you think about which one, you think about when the brother got stopped in New York with the bird calling, and the lady called the cops, right?
Yeah.
It was expected for him to go to jail. It was expected for the cop to cross that line because that's what they're there for. They're there for that. They're there to protect white supremacy. They're there to make sure that they put people in place, as it was 16. Where was that? What year was that, Tim?
1669,
So so
16.
so 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 that's bred inside the core of this nation. So when something happens, I expect you to do that. So same thing with people saying if black people would have stormed the Capitol, they expected them to shoot them, right? They should have been shot. You can visualize it. You can visualize them shooting, and we can sit back and justifying. Yeah, they should have been shot, right? Because in our mind, we conditioned to think that's the behavior. But at the same time, look how long it took for on January 6th when it really happened, when white people stormed the Capitol. That was just a cookout.
Yeah,
And so
well, how long was it? How long was it? But that's something that law enforcement has traditionally done, is stand by when white folks run amok.
Yeah.
They join in. There were
so
cops in that crowd.
when somebody was trying to break into, get close, they were wrong for shooting a lady, right? I mean, it was like, why you? I mean, in my eye, she's coming that close. But at what point? So I'm saying, so the law, we see in the place. So if those were black people, they would have been shot, and we can sit back and say, yeah, I get it. But the police officers are there to protect white supremacy.
Yeah. That's why the Ku Klux Klan can still exist today, and the Black Panther Party no longer exists. Anything or anybody who's far to the right, politically speaking, racially, socially speaking, is given a pass, so to speak. And that's why something like January 6th can happen, because the people who stormed the Capitol were trying to accelerate white supremacy. They weren't trying to eliminate white supremacy. And deep down inside, we all know where and how and whom created the policies and rules and regulations that today still inform our institutions and the way that law enforcement conduct their business. And so on the one hand, the January 6th terrorists can largely get away with what they're doing or serve sentences of not more than 5 to 6 years, or less than that in many cases. But members of the Black Panther Party were arrested, jailed. Many of them are still in jail today, hunt down and killed, and then protected through laws such as those that Tim shared with us earlier. And so even when reform has happened, such as body cam footage or introducing more progressive legislation like the George Floyd Act, which I don't believe has passed, but even when things like that happen, or even when Derek Chauvin goes to prison, or the cop who killed a black teenager here in Chicago a few years ago, even when he goes to prison for a few years, those are crumbs, so to speak. Those are things meant to pacify in order to protect the ultimate and broader, more comprehensive institution of law enforcement in this country. Even like in our planning conversation, Tim, like George Floyd is murdered, and then months later, Juneteenth is passed into law, like within the next calendar year. So black man murdered for nothing, essentially, and Juneteenth is passed along as an exchange for George Floyd's life, along with Derek Chauvin and a handful of other cops. But ultimately, the Minneapolis Police Department still functions largely in the same way that it did then, just like it does all over the country. Law enforcement is still an institution which we socially and normally accept, as opposed to questioning the very existence of police in the very first place.
Absolutely.
If I could just say one thing, like you went left and right, I would have just want to correct you on that. I don't think it's left or right. I think it's just people in general. People in general wants to it's capitalism has somebody got to be on the bottom, and it just so happened to be African Americans are at that point. So whether you're Republican or Democrat, you still believe in that tenement that black people need to be on the bottom, because even though you have some extremists, even the ones that say they're on our side, they haven't done the things to show anything different. As you talk about the George Floyd bill or whatever, that could have been passed. Same way the Republicans right now are bullying Congress and everything else. They could help us bully that too, right? Because that's how right now that's how it's gonna be done. I remember when President Obama, it was his term more or less, he could have picked a Supreme Court judge. They bullied that man, right? They bullied him. They said, "No, you're not," and it didn't happen. So so if this is so important, and we're saying this is important to us, we're going to vote on this. This is important to. We need this done. This bill needs to be passed. Why hasn't it been passed? Because it doesn't matter. It
No,
doesn't care.
agreed. But I don't. But I
You know?
think there is definitely a left and right here. But I agree that both parties, if we're talking about Democrats and Republicans, I'm not talking Democrats, Republicans. Both of them ultimately uphold white supremacy and capitalism in this country. But when I think about left and right, I'm thinking about fascism
Okay.
supported by capitalism, or
Okay.
more progressive policies that most people would consider to be socialist.
Okay.
Like Students for a Democratic Society and the left movement of the 50s and 60s, that's where COINTELPRO started. And they didn't infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan. They infiltrated teenage white boys on college campuses. And then that grew into the Black liberation movement, and it became more violent, more hostile, because it was Black leftists who were advocating. So I think that there's definitely a racial element to it. I think Black bodies are disposed of in a way that white bodies are not. But I still think this country is generally hostile to anything that's considered left of the center. I mean, we call Democrats in this country liberals, but they're not. They're just liberal compared to the right wing, to Republican.
Yeah.
A typical Democratic position in this country is considered conservative if you go almost anywhere else in the world. So we get fooled into thinking that ideas like nationalized healthcare are like some socialist scheme, but they aren't. I mean, there are developed mixed economies in this world that have nationalized healthcare, but we're taught in this country that it's communist, that it's socialist, and it isn't. So I think our orientation in this country is already to the right. But I agree, it all supports capitalism, and white supremacy was designed to support capitalism. So I don't think we disagree, but I think I take your point.
Someone put in the comments, we got Cody Crutchfield. Thanks for joining. I think you want to kind of change the narrative a little bit. He said, I think the conversation requires deconstructing different aspects of racism, including you swing that word, ableism, the social model of disability, social Darwinism. What do y'all think about that? Kind of not including this in the narrative of what we're talking about.
Well, as far as racism being the direct offshoot of white supremacy, and the entire race question being about as ignorant as white supremacy on the whole, I'm not calling anybody. I'm just saying that the concept of race, just like the worldview and the phenomenon of white supremacy, they mirror mental illness. I mean, how is it that one individual or a group of individuals, be that 10 individuals or 70 million, think that they are better based on genetic happenstance over which no one has any control, that they know ins and outs, ups and downs, backwards and forwards, an entire group of humanity based on skin color. They know exactly how every individual in that group will react, the character of every individual in that group, the demeanor of every individual in that group. They're all the same, you know. It mirrors mental illness. So yeah, the different aspects of racism, I think, you know, they do need to be deconstructed. They need to be dissected. They need to be destroyed. But the only way we can get to that is if we actually talk about it. And we are moving forward into a time in American history where we're not going to be allowed to talk about these things anymore if we're not careful. Like I said in the beginning, Ron DeSantis down there in Florida has banned African American studies classes in Florida, in parts of Florida, in different. So how can we even talk about it when you have an entire segment of the population don't even want to let you learn about it, don't even want to hear about it? No, we're not discussing that, you know. So yeah, that is definitely a problem. That is definitely a very, very serious issue.
I think in that is the same way we talked earlier last week about humanizing King. I think at some point, as we have this love for white people, and like I said, I mean, it's there. Like, I mean, we care. I care a lot, right? I care really care about white people with their plight. The thing is that we got to humanize them. They got to be humanized, right? There is a sickness that's deep within them. I mean, it's like stage 4 cancer, and it's so bad, like stage 4 cancer, but then refusing the therapy. So chemotherapy it's not out. It's totally out the thrown out the door. It's even they haven't even rejected the diagnosis. All right, so that's first, but humanizing their existence. And so what I'm saying about humanizing their existence is that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to be wrong. I think that when you spend the whole life of having to be Superman and then realizing that you have some flaws, you're going to do anything and everything to make sure those flaws are not seen. So this is kind of where DeSantis is that realizing that there's some truth in that history, right? And the best thing I could do is hide those flaws. And so let's take it out. Let's take it out. Let's take it out the books. Keep in mind, there was limited stuff in there anyway. But let's totally take it out. And my thing is, let's find a way to humanize these people that we love so much. Let's tell them that they're not as great as they think they are. Not as a beat them upside the head, but to corral them and say, no, you know, as King would say, we want to love you. I really want to love you. I really want to love you. Really want to walk with you in this education of finding out who you really are. And it's okay to find out that these evil things that you've done. But at the same time, as we bring, as we sit back and identify the rights and the wrongs that's going on, something has to be paid back for that. So if you stole something from me, I expect something to give back, and that's humane too, right? So somehow in order for them to be humane, because the whole thing about white supremacy was to dehumanize people, and not realizing in that they dehumanize themselves. I say we should try to give back that humanity back to them.
I think to build on that too, that orientation is very different for me, and I would imagine most white people as well, because the way that I was taught, even from a young age, was there are people in the world who look different than you, and they're just as good as you are, right? Like we're all people, you know, and without any attention to the system of white supremacy or the concept of whiteness in the very first place. My parents, as well-meaning as they were, and for a large part of my life, never questioned, they never questioned whiteness as a construct in the first place. The idea of white as a race, whiteness as a thing, was just assumed in my household, and I think in most white households. And it is that mindset, it is the mindset of whiteness that I and others must strive to cleanse ourselves of, because it prevents me from being truly human, as you've said. Amari. And so Tim, this reminds me of a poem you wrote years ago. You did the 360 newsletter, but this was probably 1998. And the gist of the poem was, if all you understand is violence, I will give you violence. If all you understand is bloodshed, I will give you bloodshed. If you want to be friends, like if this is all you understand, then I shall seek to become your friend. And so I think in that respect, and this goes back to the King conversation, the concept of nonviolence is actually hateful and disrespectful and hinders progress towards a more human existence for white people. It's like going to the cookie jar and no one saying anything. And after a while, you just assume that the cookie is yours. You forget that someone's baked that cookie, someone bought that cookie. Those cookies are meant for other people. Someone needs to smack my hand in the cookie jar and say, nope, not your cookie. You had yours already. And that smack isn't out of hate. That smack is out of love.
Out of love, right.
Out of love. And then
yes,
I understand.
Yes.
I understand my place within the family, the human family, my neighborhood, my community. I understand that it isn't about me and my cookie. It's about everybody having a cookie.
I like that, because it's something like you said with a child. I mean, if we don't, our children will get hurt. If we don't love them, we don't discipline them, what will they be? So I agree with that, man. Yeah, we gotta. There got to be some love given. I think that's what I mean.
There's some tough love. I think it's true. I think you hit the nail right on the head right there. And I think you said in one of our planning sessions that, sometimes the morally pure thing to do is to smack the dog mess out of somebody, because they need for that to happen. If a kid is reaching for a hot stove, you have to take action. You cannot just allow them to reach up there and burn themselves. And I think the philosophy, the worldview, and all this training and indoctrination in nonviolence really is allowing white supremacists to reach into that flame, and they're gonna get burned. I think their ancestors will suffer based on their actions right now, based on the kinds of white supremacy, the white supremacist worldview. I think whites in the future, so-called white folks in the future, will suffer the consequences of their predecessors' actions, the sins of the father, so to speak. And I'm not. And here's another question: if we are so uncivilized in this country, if we are the uncivilized group, if we are the bottom of the barrel, why are we not reaching out around the throats of white folks en masse in response to centuries of white rage and degradation? Why have we not chosen vengeance? Why have we not chosen to get our own sense of redress and reciprocity in our own ways? If we are so uncivilized and need to be culled like savages the way they treat us in the streets, how come most of us have not spent, like Miles Davis said, he would like to spend the last 5 minutes of his life choking a white man? How come so few of us have gone out in that respect if we're so uncivilized and so beastly?
Wow. Wow. I think the question could be, Tim, why haven't we? Right? Why haven't we? I mean, because you look at it, if you really take a real deep dive into what we all been through, the question is, dang, why haven't we? And what we waiting on, right? What we waiting on? Why are we so scared? Man. Why are we so scared? I think that has to be the question. But
it's one of the central paradoxes of my existence. It's like, why not? Because every movie, every TV show, every play that white supremacy produces is about winning against insurmountable odds. We can't win. There's no way we could have beat the Axis powers in World War II, but they did it. World War I, they said the same thing. You know what I mean? Star Wars, the same thing. Insurmountable odds, the Death Star, destroy a whole planet, you know? But we got a way to beat that too. But when it comes to African Americans, we don't think we can win. We don't think we have a prayer. We don't think we have a chance in hell of changing anything in any other way with nonviolent strategies and prayer and unconditional love. And I think that's because we have bought the illusion of white supremacy, the messages of white supremacy, and the unwritten rules of white supremacy, which is do not resist. That is a death penalty. Stop resisting. That is a death penalty. That's the first thing they say to you when they grab you by the wrist. Stop resisting. You resist white supremacy and you die. How many names could we list here today of individuals, male and female, black and brown, who resisted white supremacy in some way and are straight up dead now? Okay. We have an interesting statistic in the notes. 25% of black people own guns compared to 14% 6 years ago. And that's just the registered gun owners. Is that enough?
No. But keep in mind is that anytime African Americans start owning guns is a situation. I think that a big situation. I mean, we all can go back and think about when the Panthers stormed the Capitol in California. You had Ronald Reagan at that time, member of the NRA. NRA. I mean, they supported gun rights. But when that happened, changed everything, right? It was a situation with gun ownership, and laws were changed, right? But every time black people start picking up their guns, that's when laws are changed. Or even the NRA, who has a lot of pull within Congress, they're not there to support African Americans in their plight for having guns either. So is there anything that you think NRA was to take a stand and there's a black person involved with it? When was the last time they spoke out? Do we need more? I mean, it's a constitutional right. So I mean, you have one, you don't have one, right? But um, but if we have them, we got to have a reason why to have them, right? And who do we want to use them against or for?
Well, I think we should use them against and for the same reasons and the same people they use them against and for. They have developed an enemy based on years and years, centuries, in fact, of propaganda, wild conjecture, innuendo, and bullshit. They've selected an enemy. They have chosen to degrade and demoralize and dehumanize that enemy at every turn, and they use their weapons to do it. They use their education system to do it. They use their tax code to do it. They use every means at their disposal to do it. So I think, if we have these guns, I'm not saying, yeah, let's all go out and attack a police station. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about defending your community. I'm talking about defending our children and our children's children the way that they say they need to defend their children and their children's children. But we're not doing that because we have accepted, that nonviolent tutelage that's been pushed upon us for so many decades now, that this is the way to do it.
But when you say that, are you saying king or are you saying Christianity? I'm just saying. I'm just going there because we might as well
go there. We might as well go there. I think Christianity is one pair of handcuffs that black people have on, because I think it has their demise written into it from Genesis when they start talking about the beasts of the field and that God made man in his own image, and they give you that image right there that you see, and that we are not made in the image of God. We are not men in the image of God. So I think Christianity, it has our demise built into it. I don't think I heard one speaker saying, okay, they're going to enslave you. And at the same time they enslave you, they're going to give you something so powerful as to help you use it against them. You know what I mean? It's like, why would your slave master give you a weapon so powerful as Christianity? If it has all that power, which I really, honestly and truthfully don't think it does. I think it's a cog in the machine of white supremacy. I just, and you look at how white supremacy and the religion of white supremacy, which is Christianity, has raided us for the last 400 years. I just think Christianity has our demise built right into it, with all the turn the other cheek and all the New Testament. I just think our demise is built into that religion, or our continued degradation, at any rate, is built into that religion, directly into the New Testament.
This is a particular take that I want to offer on this image. As we were pulling resources for and prepping for this discussion today, I discovered that this painting was done by a guy named Warner Salmon, who lived on the south side of Chicago for much of his life, and he painted a series of religious compositions like this one. And when he did it, he was a fairly progressive liberal person for that time period. This drawing was done in the 1920s. His intention wasn't to galvanize Christianity as the white man's religion. It wasn't to concoct an image of God that would create for white people or enhance for white people a sense of superiority, or to promote the concept of black inferiority. Those were not his intentions at all, but it's what he did. Nonetheless, it never dawned on him that Jesus might be a brown or a black looking man. He painted Jesus in the way that he just assumed Jesus looked. And he didn't think there was anything wrong with it at all, while at the same time promoting fairly and supporting fairly progressive rules, regulations, policies for that time. And so I guess for me, the reason why that's important is because every white person isn't literally killing or murdering black people every day. But it's probably true that white people we are showing our whiteness in some way, shape, or form in to other people each and every single day. And so I think for the average everyday white person who may not necessarily have the legal authority to kill somebody in the way that qualified immunity today permits, but still enjoys the privilege of whiteness every day, we have to tap into that sense of entitlement. We have to be more aware of how our whiteness influences our interactions with people, specifically people of color, and for white men, our interactions with women each and every day. Just like Warner Salmon didn't mean at all to perpetuate white supremacy knowingly in creating this painting, it's absolutely what he did. And so there are small things, small ways that I think we white people who maybe don't have necessarily the power of a police officer can still act against our own whiteness and confront our own whiteness, and frankly seek to shed our own whiteness to become more human. So I just wanted to use this painting as a way to try to indicate that point. So, but I hope that doesn't take us too far off track, guys.
No,
I don't think
but
so.
I will like to interject. Now, I believe that how Christianity was used is the problem, not Christianity being the problem.
Okay.
I think that if you look at some of the work of the black theology, and how how if I mean you see how white people use it. White supremacy can use anything for its advantage. White supremacy just happen to use Christianity for its advantage. I mean, white supremacy um can use capitalism versus anything else to if it needs to make them look better. So I think that it would have used Islam the same way. It would have used anything else. I mean, keep in mind we're saying that, and you can see even today where white supremacy has its place in those situations too. As in I mean, you can look at dark skin, light skin people, not or dark skin, not people not being displayed in anything across all religions, because of the effect of white supremacy. Um, so I don't think that it was more or less Christianity. I think that wickedness, you find wickedness to do wicked things, or as you said, like white people just being, I mean, whiteness and white people doing the white stuff. So, um, but that's what I think. But I think that, like you said, we got to move on to some other things.
But go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
I agree with you. The message is good. The word is good. It's the application that is bad.
The application,
it's a similar situation with our laws in this country and the Constitution. Great document, wonderful, great potential. It's the application of the laws and the Constitution in this country that sucks. So I agree with you on that. Go ahead, Ike.
I agree to an extent, but I think anyone who identifies as Christian should do, and maybe that's where you're going, Amari, with the black theology, but even the Bible as we understand and relate to it today has been whitewashed by a group of white men who wrote Mary Magdalene completely out of the Bible, called her a prostitute. She has her own gospel, and her gospel is actually quite profound, but she was written out of the Bible. She was then labeled as a prostitute, and it wasn't until 1978 that the Catholic Church acknowledged that, in fact, Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. She was not a sex worker, and that it had been a popular myth promoted by religious leaders, all of them male, to try to demean Mary Magdalene's station in relation to Jesus. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that she was Jesus's number one apostle. And that she, as a woman, dictated and controlled and guided the growth of Christianity from its earliest stages. But what would that mean if Mary Magdalene held that station within Christianity? What would that mean about the relationship between men and women and so on? Anyway, I think there's a deeper investigation of Christianity to try to get to its true, authentic teachings relative to what's in the Bible. But I guess as an example for, I think, how we white people can begin to shed our whiteness in a discussion about how do black people improve their condition in this society? How do we get justice? How do we end, as a society, how do we end the cycle of violent white supremacy? Oftentimes we like to say things like, well, I support the equality of all people, but violence has no part in our society. And they say that in response to uprisings after George Floyd is shot or is choked to death and killed, or in Chicago there was a young boy, Adam Toledo, who was shot and killed by police, and there were demonstrations, some of which turned a little hostile. And so the popular reaction among many of my people was, well, what happened to Adam Toledo is a shame, but it doesn't justify us going into the streets and destroying storefronts and businesses and so on and so forth. The right position for a white person in discussing something like that is to say, I don't have the moral ground to have a position. And if you want to challenge violence, challenge the violence of the state. You cannot, as a white person, challenge the violence of people who are rising up against or expressing opposition against a system that is designed to oppress, to demean, to murder, to maim, to kill. So we can promote nonviolence, but let's do that by calling for an end to military spending in this country. Let's call for a withdrawal of all military bases across the planet Earth, of which we have more than all the rest of the world combined, right? So like these are the ways that we can promote nonviolence. It isn't about attacking or belittling or chastising the man or the woman or the angry teenager that gets into the street and breaks into Walgreens. It's by challenging violence systemically. And so again, we have to think in a different way about who we are and how we relate to other people and who it is that we are attacking in our rhetoric when we promote nonviolence, so to speak. So I think, again, just for speaking directly to my people and trying to get underneath and prevent more white rage and more white violence, I think for well-meaning whites who are listening, this is something that I think we would do well to embrace together.
I got a message for well-meaning blacks who are listening.
Give it to him,
Shed
Tim.
your white supremacy.
Give it to him,
Shed
Tim.
all your notions of white supremacy. Take Jesus out the stained glass in all your churches. Try to figure out how you can get past the notion that the world has always been dominated by white people. It'll always be dominated by white people, and there's nothing that can be done. I have advice for well-meaning black folks. Don't believe the hype. Stop falling for the propaganda. Let go of the lies and the myths and the legends, and be human beings and all that entails. You know. G, where you at, man? We ain't heard from your country in a minute.
Yeah, y'all kind of went. Y'all went in a different direction I was thinking, but it's all in good the conversation. But I want to bring it back to the feeling exposed and the fact of how many black folks are now not only being killed at the hands of whites, but we have to look at some of the recent things that's happened recently in the news of just how, I mean, meaningless a black body is in this country. It almost is equal to an animal. We have a situation that happened on June 10th with Tyree Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee, who was brutally beaten to death after a reckless driving traffic stop. But he wasn't killed at the hands of a white person or white officers. He was killed at the hands of his own. Five black officers were involved in this killing, and somebody said, well, how would you have it's black on black? That's a whole nother, that doesn't count. But when you look at the track record of police officers in this country who are killing black people and brown people at an alarming rate, they themselves thought they can do the same thing and get away with it. Difference is they were fired immediately. They weren't sent home with pay until trial. They were fired immediately. But the fact that we now have black officers who now think it's okay because so many others have killed and have beaten black folks in this country that they themselves now are participating in this further defines what we're talking about tonight, that you can just do anything to a black body. And we know we have black on black crime, but that's a whole other conversation. We're talking about institutionalized. We're talking about tax-paying dollars for someone to protect and serve that are now taking the lives of their own people. Then we can talk about Eric Eugene. This happened on January 9th. This is all recent stuff here. In Texas, who was now he was robbing a store, but unfortunately it was a fake gun he was using, and a patron murdered him in a way to stop the robbery. He didn't know the gun was fake. Now in Texas, they have laws in which you can very different in terms of open carry and concealed weapons. And he wasn't necessarily breaking the law. But the problem is that what was talked about is that how many times he was shot. And this is it's all tied together of this person's meaningless. This person has no value. This person's an animal. He's not a human. It's just an object. And so when you look at these killings of how they're being killed, it speaks to what we're talking to tonight of just you can simply kill at will and doesn't matter. So all he's going to be looked at is Eric is going to look at as being a robbery gone bad. He should have known what he was doing. He should have known better. He shouldn't have came in trying to get. He left with I think $50. Well, he didn't leave it. I'm sorry. He collected maybe like $50, I think. But the patron thought enough of him as being meaningless. He didn't shoot once or twice. I believe he shot it 5 or 6 times. And his mother, Eric's mother, went on to say what was hurtful the most is the fact of how she didn't condone what he did, but she's saying how he was murdered, how he was killed was more heartbreaking more than ever. Once he was down, once he shot him in the head once, man was dead. But he continued to fire out of anger, out of maybe he'd been wanting to do this his whole life. You never know how much built up anger and so much animosity is towards Black and brown people simply because of what they see on the news every night at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Come back around at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. And Black faces are plastered all across the news as being this, and I think Cody put it somewhere here about habitual offenders, where you're constantly seeing these Black faces plastered across television of being these criminals, these meaningless people to society. We don't need them. So they're better off dead. So of course they're not going to think twice when they riddle a Black body with bullets like a firing squad, because they don't mean anything. There's no value attached to it. And when we see these things, it psychologically begins to penetrate an everyday person who would intervene in a robbery and kill someone right then and there. Like most robberies, you think someone will be scared, but a Black person is well, they're worthless anyway. I mean, they go ahead and just take them out. So I think that we have to do some self-examining in terms of definitely whiteness. We have to do some self-examining ourselves in general, that our own people, we don't do this, that we don't start looking at our own people as meaningless and worthless enough that they should be killed. There are many people who would applaud such things or find some kind of reason to side with the police officer of why they killed this person, why they beat this person. And I think it's because of what we're being fed on a daily basis, whether it be a movie, whether it be a TV show, whether it be the news, of Black bodies as being meaningless and worthless in this country.
I actually had a young Latino tell me that white people are superior, and I asked him how so, and how he could justify making a comment like that, and he proceeded to explain, they just are. They work themselves into a position in society where they are the superior people. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, The Walking Dead. This is the Walking Wounded right here. This is another one of those people who cannot, will not subscribe to anything other than white supremacy. I had a young brother tell me one time, well, when I was expressing my indignation to another brother being shot, he said, well, they've been killing Black folks. Just don't be Black then. And he changed the subject to another subject. And I'm thinking, okay, Lost Cause, Walking Dead, subscriber to white supremacy and white supremacist notions. There is no excuse for the fact that we've held on to this colonial era thinking, in that you could just kill somebody and face no repercussions from anywhere, anybody in society at any time. Not even that individual's family. Nobody is going to do anything to you. Colonial era thinking. Like I said, we're no longer brushing our teeth with borax and gunpowder and salt. We're no longer bathing 2-3 times a year. We've evolved from colonial era thinking and colonial era practices. We don't get our teeth pulled at the barber shop or down at the blacksmith shop. We've evolved from these things. How come we haven't let go of this wanton racial violence yet? And I think it works for them because we've allowed it to work for us. We've allowed ourselves to fall into this nonviolent abyss where we're going to take the high road. We're going to take the high road. We're going to be morally superior to the people who are killing us, and we're going to let them do what they do. We're going to take our rewards in heaven. Not saying it can't work, but I said it during the MLK discussion. It's the slow road. It's the long way around. It's the scenic route, along which you're going to see all types of degradation and tyranny, So, man, I think there's a better way. I think there's a better way.
Cody made a great comment that we posted there, that this reminds him of reminds them of psychological issue of learned helplessness.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It is. That's what you're describing, I think, Tim. And then the other side of it is, we didn't really touch on this, and I mean, we're running out of time, but I wanted to show this book because this is one that talks about how white people are actually diminishing themselves financially, socially, and economically as a result of identifying themselves and embracing the social construction of whiteness, specifically in some of the Midwest states, in what the author calls the heartland. So maybe it's a book that we can delve more into, but it talks about white people voting against their own interests because of their association with other white people who couldn't care less about. So, and it's all done through this psychological, as to borrow one of Cody's words, psychological connection that one so-called white person makes with another so-called white person, and assumes that another white person has their interests in mind, when in fact they don't. Whiteness diminishes white people more than anybody else, psychologically speaking, and people of color pay for it with their lives. With white people, we dehumanize ourselves psychologically, and everyone else pays for it ultimately in the end. Exactly, Stacy. Capitalism. Exactly. There's Stacy. Here's what Stacy said. So I don't know. Any last comments, guys? I know we're running out of time at this point.
I just like to.
You like that? You like what I said, Amari?
Yeah, no doubt, bro. No, you got it. You got it.
I just want to reiterate. That I like that the psychological issue of learned helplessness. I think that racism and white supremacy are socially constructed mental disorders. I think that we have created these things for ourselves, and we can cure ourselves. And I'd like to again reiterate that Black folks need to let go of white supremacy too. Gotta let it go. People of color, Black and brown people, have to let go of white supremacy.
I totally agree. That Black inferiority is just as crippling as white supremacy. I totally agree with that. I think sometimes we also like to leave with some things that we can do. I think that it's just, we talk about this white rage and how it festers and grown for the last 340 years of this nation. I think that one thing that if people could, when they call the police, especially when they call the police on on African American person, sometimes make sure it calls for that to happen. That's a good thing to. There's no other way to solve the situation, because the cops are there to it's ingrained for them to cross that line. It's ingrained across the line, and so and crossing that line with no repercussions. So sometimes this is how we get the deaths. This is how we get the abuse of power, because there's no repercussions for that. So sometimes before we even call, sometimes we gotta figure out, is it really worth it? Because if I'm just walking down the street rapping loud, that could turn into a situation, right? You know what I'm saying? Real quick, because a cop will come by with just abusing his authority, let me see your ID or whatever, and that could turn left for nothing. Versus, you know, did the cop really need to be called on something small, small infraction?
What do we got?
All right. Well, looks like we're heading towards the end here. I think we had a lot of comments tonight. Cody just put in one more comment here. We really appreciate you interacting with us. It was a great discussion. I think we got a lot of good, a lot of learning went on tonight. I think a lot of the historical aspects that they were pointing out, the timeline was great. And I think this conversation will definitely continue on. But before we get out of here, I want to take care of a couple of things. We definitely want to point you to our media publishing and consulting company that we have started. We definitely invite you to use us. If you like what we talk about tonight, we definitely can bring this into your place of work, place of your schools, wherever you are, wherever your place of employment might possibly be at. We want to render our services to you. We're not trying to get rich off this, so we're talking about nominal fees, and depending on the size of the company will vary. But to find more information about that, go to 360collective.online. That's where you can find more about exactly what we offer. We would love to be able to come out to your individual cities, your communities, and we're here to help. We're here to just not talk about this. The whole point of this show is to talk about these issues, but we want to empower you to be active in your own individual communities and take these conversations on to your friends and family and build upon our discussion tonight. Will be great. So any last words? If not, we thank you again. We hope to see you back. We're going to be releasing an advertisement for Black History Month. I think you're going to really enjoy what we have lined up. Be on the lookout on our Facebook page. If you have not friended or liked our page, please do so. And that's where you can find all our information at. So, all right. Real Powers people.
All right.
Thank you.